Global Broadcasting Networks presents Military Mom Talk Radio. We know behind every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine is the family supporting them. With over 200 episodes in 17 countries, over 5 seasons, with 3 million monthly listeners, we are radio strong. Now here are your hosts, Sandra Beck and Robin Boyd.
Hey, this is Sandra Beck, and I'm here with a special episode where we're going to talk about human trafficking. And we are visiting today with Lisa Rapp-McCall. And Lisa, I'm going to throw the mic right over to you to introduce yourself and let people know about your background.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I'm a professor in graduate social work at St. Leo University and have been studying and learning about human trafficking for a while now, and I wanted to share this information with everyone.
I think that's so important because, I hear the word human trafficking and it conjures up like somebody from like the Pacific Rim smuggled into this country and they're in a basement in like New York City and there's a bust and, it's what I've been accustomed to seeing on the news. And I know it's so much bigger and there's so much more than that. And that's why we're here to talk about this today.
Absolutely. It really is bigger than that, but that is a common perception that we have, especially in the United States. We tend to think it's happening elsewhere or people are brought into the country, and some of that's true, but it also pertains to our children and adults in our own country that are being victimized by it.
So it's not just kids.
No, it's not. It can be children. They've caught victims engaged in this from very, very young infants, which is highly disturbing, obviously. But it also can be up through adults that are pulled into this and compelled and coerced and threatened into the human trafficking.
So is human trafficking just for the sex trade? Is it for like domestic housekeepers? I mean, what does that really mean? I know you're moving people for some reason, but what are the typical reasons you move human beings? Is it like slavery?
Yes, I think that helps. Some people have called it modern day slavery, and people are forced or coerced or threatened or tricked and trapped into doing things against their will. And we tend to think a lot about it as sex trafficking, but it's actually more people are caught in labor trafficking than in the sex trafficking. So it's very broad. A few of the areas that we might find it in are agriculture and farming industry. So people will be trafficked in order to pick fruits or vegetables or harvest other things or plant. They've also found trafficking in domestic services, as you mentioned. So those are cleaning crews, maybe for commercial or even our homes. They've even found it in home health care, which is really upsetting and scary, in that people are getting pulled in and then they're going to be the nurse or the health care helper to people who are ill or home and bedbound. So there's all different ways that this can be found, and what we've seen is that if there's a way to exploit people, traffickers have found out how to do that.
Wow. So it really, when I look at I look at domestics at the hotel, or I look at, like out here in California, we use a lot of migrant farm workers. They're out there. I used to teach English in the field, and I was horrified that I was, sitting on these little white buckets. We would do English
Right.
at lunch break, and there's like children there, and they're there with their parents. And I'm thinking, gosh, this, I didn't realize the extent of what it was until I started seeing, just on that very small level.
Absolutely. Most of the time we go about our days and we don't realize that these victims are just right out in plain sight sometimes, but we're not aware of it.
So are they like, and this sounds so awful, but are they like elephants that are chained up, and then when they're unchained they don't know they're free, or is it fear? Is this indentured servitude? Like, what's the deal? Like, if they're out working, doing things, why don't they leave?
Right, really good question. Why don't they just run, sneak away, sneak off? But that's part of how they got into it. Many times they are tricked into it, or once they have gotten into it, they are threatened if they leave. Sometimes their family members are threatened. So they really are scared. Sometimes they're beaten. Many times with our young children and adolescents, they're often drugged. So they are drugged into compliance to do some sex trafficking, and then they're addicted to that drug that they're giving them, and they can't leave. They have nowhere to go. They may be isolated. So there's lots of reasons why they can't just sneak away or run off. They get pulled into this, and they're very scared to leave.
Well, I would imagine, especially if they come from another country, they don't know the language, they're away from their family, and then, whatever substance they're given, can also alter their judgment, alter their reality.
Absolutely. And they're isolated, so they don't often know where they are. They're moved around very frequently, so they're confused. So imagine being in a different country. You don't know one city or one state to the next, and you're being taken place to place, maybe during the night. You're not with other people. So it's pretty scary and pretty isolating. And if they do run, where would they go? What would they do? How would they communicate with others? Who would believe them?
Right. Or like when I look at those human trafficking signs that you see sometimes in bathrooms, I'm like, they're all in English. Like,
right.
That's great if you're, a native English speaker, but if you're, Thai or Vietnamese or Russian, I know there's quite a few girls that I met in real estate that have had family members, or they were originally trafficked through the modeling industry, and run away in Italy, run away in London. Told me horror stories. Now they're living here in the United States. They're successful. They're actually a group of successful real estate agents out here that experienced that as young women, and now they're in their 40s. They do a lot of advocacy work for these groups, but it's so sneaky,
Yes. It's very sneaky. It's very secretive. It's highly illegal. So they're very good at sneaking these victims around and not getting caught. They'll go from place to place. They keep it quiet. They make sure they stay quiet. They have stories and backstories made up so that if anyone were to ask something, they could give a reply. But that's the name of the game, this secret and quiet, hard to detect kind of thing, because this is their business and they're making big money to do it.
Right. At the end of the day, it comes down to dollars.
Right.
So what happens? Do they just kill these people when they don't need them anymore? I mean, I don't mean to be cold and crass, but if humans are their commodity, like when a sheep is sick and they can't be used, we slaughter them, we burn them or whatever if they're sick. If they're a product that we're not going to sell in the U.S., we flood the third world countries with our less than stellar products. I mean, you know these things, you hear these things. So what do you do with a human being though?
Right. Sometimes they are beaten and left. Sometimes they are thrown away. Sometimes they are killed, sold from one trafficker to a next, just like slavery in back in the day. So any and all of those things, whatever is convenient for them.
Wow. So when these things happen, are they happening, and again, this is my own ignorance, but are they happening to also like U.S. citizen children, or are these just all imported adults and children?
No, they are happening to U.S. citizens, adults and children, unfortunately. And there are certain groups that they will target because they are most vulnerable. So, like you mentioned, runaway and homeless youth, children who have aged out of the child welfare system or foster homes. They've been abused in their past, so they are very vulnerable. Impoverished people, as well as immigrants and refugees, etc. So the most vulnerable people are targeted, but yes, indeed, some of our missing children and runaway children are perfect targets for this trafficking.
Is that what they mean by the term missing and exploited children? Like, yes. I really, I see those signs at Walmart, like missing and exploited children. Like, an exploited child is a child forced to work in whatever capacity.
Yes, that is exactly right. Absolutely.
Wow. And obviously they don't go to school. They're probably not fed properly. They're not out milling around the community, so we even know they're there. It's like a hidden, like the what was it, the abolition or the slavery, the tunnels, they were transported under wraps, really.
Right. Most are not in school. They are whisked away and just missing and forgotten, unfortunately. Some are in school, and we have some interesting kind of things they're doing now online to traffic children. And these children are living in our homes, Sandra, and they're going to school every day. So it's a little scary, but that's a whole nother arena now that has opened up to them for trafficking.
Wow. So we're about to go to commercial break, Lisa. Where should people find out about this, or where can they go to find out more about you?
Well, I would definitely ask them to check out the Pasco County Commission on Human Trafficking to learn more about this, and also the Administration for Children and Families is a wonderful location for more information.
Okay, we'll be back after the break.
Ahead, stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
If you could live your life truly standing in a place of peace, joy, and abundance, wouldn't that make your heart soar? Now you can, with Lessons in Joyful Living, with your host, Kimberly Rinaldi, Mondays at noon Central. Kimberly Rinaldi, having created a highly successful coaching practice, now teaches lessons in joyful living. She believes in empowering others and that through it, you have the ability to break through any and all barriers, thus allowing you to reach your greatest potential and joyfully step into your life's purpose. What used to take weeks, months, or even years, she can now teach you in a matter of hours with her programs. For more on Kim and her show, go to her website, KimberlyRinaldi.com. That's RINALDI.com. Then join us for Lessons in Joyful Living with your host, Kimberly Rinaldi.
It's words you never heard.
I always get a kick out of the warning labels companies attach to prevent lawsuits from the hooky-crooky of this world. A warning label on a dishwasher cautioned not to put any person in the unit. Speaking of dishwashers, one product warning on a television remote control read, "Not dishwasher safe." That's too bad because we know how dirty the remote control gets. In fact, we press the buttons even harder when we know the battery is dead. What are we, part of the ridiculati? A warning on a baby stroller read, "Remove child before folding." Here's one for the blunderbusses and popinjays among us. A label on a letter opener read, "Safety goggles recommended." Call me snarky, but any society that needs this many disclaimers has too many lawyers, pettifoggers, and snollygosters.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio.
We're here today with Lisa Rapp-McCall, and we're talking about human trafficking. And one of the things that I find fascinating, Lisa, is how has the Internet transformed the human trafficking industry? Because it's big money.
It really has transformed it, Sandra. First, the recruitment now for a lot of our youth is happening right online. So these traffickers will follow and kind of stalk and look for different kids and what they're posting on the various social media outlets, and kind of looking for the sad kid, the depressed, maybe a naive kid, vulnerable child, and they start connecting with them, trying to make a friendship, a buddy, etc. They may talk to them. They may talk to them for months to groom them and get them to really think of them as a really good friend. And the next thing they do is they might start saying that they really have feelings for them, or make them think that this is a boyfriend, girlfriend some kind of online relationship. They could start with getting them to send some naked pictures of them. They might send pictures back. And before you know it, it's progressed to meeting up somewhere and doing things, and then holding that over the child's head by saying, I have those naked pictures you sent to me. I'm going to show everyone unless you do ABC.
So there's the extortion. There's
the extortion. Yep. And they're going to tell your parents, or I know where you live, where your parents live. I know you have a cat and dog. I know you have a little brother. And I'm going to hurt them if you don't do what I tell you. And you're going to come down here, you're going to meet so-and-so, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. So we're seeing that. We're also seeing recruitment on dating sites for maybe adult women and adult men, meeting up, and you don't really know the person too well, except that you've had a few exchanges maybe on the dating site, and suddenly you're meeting up with someone and they're dragging you and taking you somewhere. People don't know where you went on your date, or what's going on, and you're either missing, or they're going to act like your boyfriend and everything's okay for a while, but then they seduce you and pull you into something like, we're out of money, we need you to go do this. I'm going to hurt someone if you don't do it. If you loved me, you would do it. And there could be like domestic violence type of violence, psychological violence, all of that. So they will pull them in, and the online has opened up a brand new avenue for traffickers.
Right, to meet kids and to deal in volume business.
Absolutely. And the buyers are online too. And they're on the dark web. You may have heard of that.
Sure.
This was sort of new to me too, but the buyers go on the dark web, and unfortunately that's where they see all kinds of advertisements for sex with children and minors and adults, and all kinds of different, various things that whatever they may want. They will go somewhere to meet in some, hotel or back of a bar or whatever it is, and that's where things are going on. But they'll go through that dark web to get there. So the Internet has opened that up as well.
Wow. It's like Amazon for kids. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, if you can, about the psychology of these predators. Are they young? Are they old? Are they typically male? Are they do they have other children or young people being their accomplices? What does that look like?
Well, there's a variety, but the vast majority of our sex buyers are males, middle-aged, white, who are married. Sometimes they're looking specifically for children. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they just want anyone. They will travel out of their neighborhoods generally to get them. Even if there is something closer, they try to get away from their neighborhood or family or someone who may be driving by to see what are you doing in this neighborhood or whatever. So they will go, driving
So they know,
hours.
they know they're doing something wrong. They know they could be caught. Like, this isn't somebody who's has such a mental illness that they can't really be in control of their own impulses. This is premeditated. This is something that's arranged like a turkey pot pie dinner.
Right. I mean, there are a few that, may have that problem where they can't control, but these are generally
choices.
Not. These are choices that they're making, and they have to go through a lot to, get on the dark web and, find what they're looking for in their area or whatever. So there's plenty of time to turn back and change your mind, but they're not.
Well, and they're probably, not that this is intelligent behavior at all, but, every once in a while you'll see on the news, like the wife will say, like, I had no idea what my husband was doing. And, they're smart. They're sneaky. It's
Yes.
like, I know I lived in a marriage where there was lots of deception, nothing like this, but there was a lot of deception, and there's a trust there. Like you said, these are white men. They're married. They may have their own children.
Yes.
And their own families. They could be prominent in their communities, and they have this dark secret that they whatever. And, but they're not dumb either, because you've got to, you probably have to get the cash together. You've got to be able to meet somewhere. You're going to make sure you're not going to get caught, and because you don't hear about a lot of these people being caught. Do we not catch them, or are they not publicized?
It's hard to catch them, although the police and authorities are doing a much better job now of catching them. They are going on the dark web themselves. They are looking and trying to shut down the traffickers and also do sting operations and catch the buyers. But it's really hard to stay a step ahead of these traffickers and buyers. Like you said, they're very smart. They've planned for this. And there's a lot of shame and embarrassment and possibly their careers at stake and families at stake. So they do a lot of double checking and making real sure that they're not going to get caught. So it's just very hard for the authorities to catch them.
Well, and I look at that Glee star, the guy who played Puck, Mark Salling, and and instead of going to jail, I don't know why he killed himself, but his death was ruled a suicide, shortly before, I guess, his sentencing. I'm not really sure exactly the timeline, but he had, I don't know, tons of child porn, tons of things, and he was a public figure. And then when he pleaded guilty to child porn, and he was in possession of, who knows what he did in his personal life, but he had a lot to lose. He had a good career.
Right. And a lot of these buyers do as well. One was recently caught not too far from where we live, and he was a veterinarian. So there's a lot at stake here, and they're willing to risk that. But there is a lot of shame and guilt that they have doing it, but it doesn't seem like enough to stop them from doing it.
Right. And I was just online, before the show preparing, looking at, I don't know if you have any statistics here, but, what's reported here for Ark of Hope for Children says 4.5 million trafficked persons are sexually exploited, 300,000 Americans under the age of 18, and then there's about 20,000 victims traveling trafficked into the U.S. every year. I mean, these are phenomenal statistics.
Absolutely. This is a widespread problem globally, and the statistics globally are that they think there's about 40 million victims around the world, which is just unfathomable. It's about a $150 billion industry worldwide. So these victims are throughout the world, trafficked around and about. We are in the U.S. more of a destination than an outward bound type of trafficking country. But it is amazing the numbers that we're talking about.
Well, because they're like anything. I mean, again, this is a vulgar way to put it, but they're used up by like probably 25, 26.
Right.
People want young children, or at what age? But by the time you're 24, 25, and then you've had this whole experience, and then you're done. Now, we talked about labor trafficking. We talked about sex trafficking. One of the things that I find really disturbing is organ trafficking.
Yes, there's more of that going on in other countries, but organ trafficking's very prevalent, and adoptions, so they're trafficking babies. That was another area that I was surprised to learn about, but that's happening quite frequently as well, especially in South America. Some of those adoptions that are going out are not really that the mother or father gave permission. They were impregnated, had a baby, the baby was taken and sold into adoption. So there's some really, unique, I guess you could call it, ways of trafficking that are not the typical. There's also illicit drug trade that goes on illegally, and peddling and begging rings. So if you see people begging and peddling for money along the street or on the corner or whatever, sometimes that is just the legitimate person, and sometimes they're being forced to peddle and beg for money for traffickers.
Wow. I'm going to take us to commercial break. We're visiting today with Lisa Rapp-McCall, and the website that you want people to check out, Lisa, is what for today?
I would love you to check out Administration for Children and Families, acf.hhs.gov, and the PolarisProject.org.
Okay, so PolarisProject.org. We're visiting today with Lisa Rapp-McCall. We're talking about these vulnerable targets, our children, our young people who are exploited and used for commercial gain. We'll be back after the break talking more about human trafficking.
We've got lots more ahead. Stay with us on Military Mom Talk Radio.
LinkedIn. It's a great tool and a great way to do business in today's social media driven world. And Carol McManus is the LinkedIn Lady with the LinkedIn Lady Show, Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons at 4 p.m. Eastern on allbusinessradionetwork.com. The LinkedIn Lady Show is designed to inform, inspire, and educate businesses. Every social media site has a specific demographic, personality, and purpose. And the LinkedIn Lady will interview a variety of guests, such as business owners who can showcase their business and talk about how they use social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, Pinterest, and of course, LinkedIn. For more on Carol and the show, check out her website, LinkedInLady.com. As trends change and new applications become available, the LinkedIn Lady Show will bring that information to you in an easy-to-use, fun, and engaging way. Every Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons at 4 p.m. Eastern, it's the LinkedIn Lady Show with Carol McManus on allbusinessradionetwork.com.
It's words you never heard.
Did you know that besides home and work, Americans spend more time at the mall than anywhere else? There are 50,000 shopping malls in the United States alone. The Mall of America, located between Minneapolis and St. Paul, is the largest in the world, with more than 500 stores. What's a word for a person who is a compulsive shopper? An oniomaniac. Studies have shown that women will buy more if they hear their heels clicking on the floor. So designers often use hard flooring in hallways. Of course, the stores want customers to spend all their coopity-coop. That's another word for money. Well, I gotta run. There's only one more shopping day until tomorrow. My husband said if I don't quit shopping so much, he would leave me. Lord, I'm gonna miss that man.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Sandra Beck, and we're visiting today with Lisa Rapp-McCall, and we're talking about human trafficking, and the conversation turned to organ trafficking. And I was reading online that, you can get $5,000 for a kidney, and I mentioned to Lisa on break that, boy, if you're poor and you have children to feed, $5,000's a lot of money for a kidney. You got another one. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect, but and then there was that urban myth about, kind of waking up in the bathtub on ice with your kidney missing. But that's not so much a myth, is it?
No, that actually has been found to be happening in Africa, where someone will be kidnapped, usually a young, healthy adult, but sometimes children as well, as horrifying as this is. And, they are given the medication, anesthesia, etc., put to sleep. Their whatever organ it is that they need are taken out, and they wake up with an organ missing. Sometimes, of course, they die because they're out, left wherever, and no one finds them in time. And that organ is sold because it's so needed and so expensive then, especially in a country like Africa. So it's really just unbelievable that these things are happening, but they do.
Well, I figure there's got to be, this is just up to human creativity. How can we farm babies, like you said, out of South America? You've got mothers forced to be impregnated to sell these little healthy babies, or maybe not so healthy. But it also comes down to desperate people do desperate things. So if you're facing the end of your life because you need a kidney or a liver and you have a lot of money, I mean, it can be very enticing.
Absolutely. And I think that's really, an important part of this is that oftentimes the victims are very desperate and needy for whatever reason, or impoverished, or, are out of their country and out of their language comfort. And then there's buyers. And all of that added together means that we're at the whim of the creativity of these traffickers. And this is like organized crime. They are very crafty. They're very organized. They have a hierarchy, an organizational chart, if you will, some of them. And they're very hard to find and stop. In fact, in some countries, the police are involved and they are on the take with the traffickers, in order to look the other way. And so they're getting paid to do that.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, because, in adoptions, at least in the 80s and 90s, when a lot of my friends were going to Russia and China, they were told to bring, quote unquote, gifts,
Right.
They called it gifts, gifts of cash and gifts of toys and gifts of diapers and gifts of, I would sit there going oh, that's so nice. They're bringing gifts, and
Right.
then you go home and think about it and wow, okay. So, what did they just do? Or,
Yeah.
But when you have an agency, a foreign agency that says this is the way, I don't think, necessarily all the people are being nefarious. If you go to these international adoption agencies and they're not regulated, let's say by the United States, you adopt in China, you adopt in Russia, or Latvia or some of those other countries, there's a protocol there. And you're told to, you bring money in envelopes and you give this money as you go along, to help move the transaction along. But I don't know how many parents ever stop to think about the legitimacy of where did that baby come from, especially, in countries that are, the propaganda from that country is a glut of unwanted children.
Right. So you go there with best of intentions and follow the protocol, and sometimes the trafficking is behind the scenes. So the woman or man who's working at that agency and helping you adopt, they have no idea that the children were not given up in the typical fashion for adoption by their biological parents. So sometimes the trafficking is behind a normal business or agency illegally, and those people don't even realize that way in the back there are things going on like, brothels or getting babies illegally or drugs or whatever, and they have no idea.
Well, how would you?
Right.
I think that's just kind of that thing where you just put it up to, I say a prayer that this is, this is all for the greater good. But, there's just no way to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. So okay, we talked about organ trafficking, we've talked about, infant trafficking. Let's talk about what happens to these people when they're done. Like, they're done with this career, if you will. You're 26, you're 28 years old, you've been in, child trafficking or you've been trafficked or sold, bought and sold. There's I participated over in the Pacific Rim in some fundraisers for group homes, for homes for especially these girls to go to where they can get, and there's another one in Russia that I work with, and they help them get educated, they help them, but the psychological damage has to be unreal.
It really is. The short and long-term effects for these folks, adults or children, men or women, is really very serious. So you mentioned just even, how will you take care of yourself? Where will you go? They're literally homeless. They have no money. They have no clothes. They often have very serious medical problems. Because they were beaten or repeatedly abused and raped. They may have had diseases or whatever that were never taken care of, broken bones that healed the wrong way, dental problems, organ problems, etc. They have no skill per se for a job. They may not know the language very well. They're very disoriented. So there's so many things that they need, and more services are being developed for these victims in the United States, but we need so many more. The homes, like you mentioned, there are more and more coming along, but the beds fill up so quickly. Even when the police are able to save some victims, where do you put them? Where do they go? They're really helpless. So we have to do a lot more work on getting funding and getting services for all these former victims.
Well, and helping the victims is fairly new. Like, when you look at the child trafficking over, the past 200 years. And the reason I say this is I participate in World of Children that that has awards and grants that go to programs like these around the world that deal with the after effects. I think we spend a lot of time, trying to prevent these things and shut the business down. But then the victims were just like, well, you're a victim. And I see more and more over the last 20 years groups coming forward, religious groups and philanthropic groups that really are trying to work with these young adults for depression, for PTSD, for acute stress reaction, disassociation, self-harm, addiction, adjustment disorder. We know so much more today than we did 50 years ago.
Absolutely, and we know that they need long-term therapy and treatment, and so we're trying to educate health care and mental health care workers so that they can be prepared to work with these victims, because even if they were only in a short time before they were rescued, the harm is still quite grave and very serious.
Well, especially because you're talking, when I look at, I kind of relate this to some of the post-traumatic work, for our veterans today. We've got these young, 18, 19, 20, 25-year-old veterans who have been in a war experience and come back forever changed. And we know that there's long-term effects. I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. But now you take a child who's in their development stage. They're developing their personality. They're developing their physical body. And all of this is happening kind of concurrently with their own development. How do you develop into a healthy, functioning adult if you're broken at the get-go?
Right. It's really, really difficult. Like you said, they're developing their understanding of the world, trust for adults, safety, attaching to human beings, having relationships, friends and otherwise. That's all very confusing now. They have the mental health problems. They have physical problems because those things weren't supposed to be happening when their body is developing. They're not getting proper nutrition. They're not getting enough calories. They're not getting any kind of immunizations or vitamins, for goodness sakes, anything. So all of that shows up as malnutrition, etc. So it takes a long time. The good news is that kids are resilient, but it's a lot of treatment that's required in order to get them feeling okay and starting to live in the real world, whatever that is.
Right, whatever that looks like. So,
right.
Yeah, there's psychological consequences, there's physical consequences, and then there's also the question of, these children have not been educated, they have not been exposed to anything. So, to expect them to be productive in society, I think is, that's like so far down the line.
Right, and we really need the residential centers in a lot of cases because at least there we can help them get caught up in school, get them caught up in reading and math and everything, because they really can't be expected to just jump out of this and go get a job. That's really not going to happen.
That's like television.
Right. This is not going to be all well and good at the end of our 60 minutes here. So it takes a lot of time. That all is a lot of money for services, especially residential, but we really need those kind of services to make a difference.
Okay, we'll be back after the break more with Lisa Rapp-McCall about human trafficking, and we'll be back.
We'd love to hear from you. Check us out at militarymomtalkradio.com or find us on Twitter and Facebook. Our shows are available on iTunes anytime from 0000 hours to 23:59. For now, stay right where you are. There's more Military Mom Talk Radio after these messages.
Would you like to know how to bring more ease to all the decisions you need to make in life? Knowing your core values is the first step in Joyce's free live masterclass. You'll discover your top 5 core values in as little as 45 minutes. Join her now at freegiftfromjoyce.com.
It's words you never heard.
Did you know 1/3 of the population suffers from bad breath? Several years ago, a New York City doorman was actually suspended from work because people were complaining about his bad breath. Other words for foul-smelling breath are halitosis and ozostomia. So, what are common causes of ozostomia? Coffee is a problem because it's very acidic and bacteria reproduce faster in an acid environment. Candy and gum contain sugar, which is also a problem because sugar feeds the bacteria that cause bad breath. Alcohol is another culprit. What's another name for cheap wine? Plonk, slip slop, or stinky bus.
It's words you never heard.
I'm Carolyn Davidson, and you can have fun challenging your words you never heard vocabulary with my free app, Too Funny for Words.
We're back with more great conversation on Military Mom Talk Radio.
We're here today with Lisa Rapp-McCall, and we're talking about human trafficking, and we've talked about the physical consequences, the psychological consequences. We've talked about the economics of, the economics and the multi-billion-dollar industry it is to farm and transport and traffic and use human beings for our own reasons. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to identify, especially children or people that might be in your community that are working against their will or trafficked here, or part of this trade, if you will. But before we do that, I want to make a comment, Lisa. You were talking about many of these kids, or the victims, I should say, are beaten. They're denied food and water. They're tortured and drugged. Probably for the end result of absolute obedience, and no desire or no ability, I should say, to free themselves. When you strip a human being of all these things, what's left in the identity? I look at my identity and go, okay, I'm Polish, Ukrainian, Czechoslovakian, and German, and my grandparents have this language, and I went to this college, and I worked for these companies. There's all these labels that come together to form my identity, but a lot of these people have been removed maybe even before they remembered a family. So where is their identity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Some of the kids have been removed very, very young. They don't know, and it's hard to backtrack because they don't know where they've been or where they were. It's very confusing. And it's very confusing for children and adults when all of that has been stripped away from you. You've basically been treated like an animal. It's like we have to start from the very beginning with treatment of just giving you self-esteem and safety and belonging and teaching trust, etc. And many the authorities are able to backtrace where they came from or where they were, but some of them are not returning to their families because their families actually were the ones that sold them into trafficking for money for whatever reason. So they become wards of the state in the child welfare system. But it's very disorienting, it's very confusing, and again takes years and years of counseling and assistance, and really foster homes or residential treatment centers to rebuild human beings.
So if we're a target destination, I heard you say that. So, we're not really outbound. We're not sending, glut of American people outward. We're actually bringing these people into our country. When they are removed from the business, or they are discarded or discovered, in our society, are they covered as a victim? Like who then takes these kids? Like, you're 13 years old, you've been trafficked from some country, you're not going to return them to their country if you could even find out where they came from. So who takes them then? Do they become wards of the state of where they're found? Like, what happens to them?
It's a good question. Sometimes they become wards of the state. Sometimes they are sent back to that country where they're wards of that country. Immigration has to get involved and decipher and weed through all this. So sometimes we're keeping kids here for a while until court cases are processed and judges decide what is going to happen. It's really complicated and confusing. A lot of them don't want to go back. They came from abject poverty. Their families were tricked into selling them or wanted to sell them. These children or youth or young adults now do not want to go back to their country. They want to stay here. So it gets very confusing with immigration, etc. But many do get to stay, and they receive services, and they heal.
Is it like our foster and homeless, thing that when you're 18, you age out of the system and you're just on your own?
Yes, or there's residential even for adults in these situations, and so there might be group homes and those kind of homes where they're working on rehabilitation and giving them skills, teaching them English, etc.
So how do we identify? Because, it is sneaky but these people have to appear somewhere, especially if they're domestics, if they're, I don't know how often the children, like if you see a child in a bar, like, is that a good red flag? Like, what do you look for?
Right. Let's think about this because they're among us and they're also speaking out more and calling into the hotline more to get assistance. So if you see someone who doesn't have ID, this is an adult more like, they don't seem to have a permanent home address, even a child. They might have few, if any, belongings. They might have tattoos or branding on them. Sometimes they look like barcodes. Sometimes they're names. Sometimes they're numbers, as if they're like something you bought at the grocery store. They may always be with some adult that it doesn't really seem quite right. They seem to lack freedom. They seem to be coerced. Maybe someone looks really malnourished or exhausted because they're not sleeping, they're starving, they're hungry. You might see bruises because they're physically abused oftentimes. Maybe there's untreated medical conditions that you notice. Maybe they're not making eye contact and they're looking around nervous, panicky, paranoid, submissive. They seem to be very submissive with some maybe older male with them. You might ask their address. They don't seem to know it, don't seem to know the day or where they've been. They have a funny story about, they're just visiting but can't give you details. All those kind of shady things that make you feel like this is a little weird. Go with your gut and, give the human trafficking hotline a call. You don't have to know for sure. It's just you're suspicious of something. And that number is 888-373-7888.
Can you give that again? 888-373?
7888. So again, all you have to do is feel suspicious. You don't have to prove anything. You can just call, give as much information as you know, and the authorities will do their part, but it's really important that we speak up when we see these things. I don't know if you remember, but a few months ago, a airline stewardess noticed that there was something peculiar about this older man with this young 15-year-old disheveled, filthy girl with bad clothes. Meanwhile, he looked very wealthy, and she was able to get the girl alone coming out of the bathroom, and the girl told her, and they had authorities waiting at the gate. So any one of us can make that call. Again, if you see something suspicious, say something, even if it's an adult. Like you said, it could be domestic house or commercial cleaning, landscapers, agriculture, a salon or spa you go to that it doesn't seem quite right the way they're being treated, or they seem fearful. You may see, just something that looks off or wrong. Please call. Or if you're a victim listening now of this type of trafficking, call. Hundreds of calls are coming in each day to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and they're making a difference. They're saving victims. Victims are telling their story. They're getting out of this, and they're informing authorities so that we all know what's going on and we can hear their stories and help them. So we want to spread this information to family and friends, so that we can all do our best to help these victims get away and help rebuild their lives.
Well, and I think for many of the people listening today, the biggest aha moment, that I had is that they're hiding in plain sight. Like, I just popped onto NBC News to look at this heroic flight attendant rescues a teenage human trafficking victim. And this girl was sitting there with greasy blonde hair in the window of aisle seat 10 on a flight from Seattle to San Francisco. And the flight attendant who worked for Alaska Airlines said that the girl looked like she had been through hell, and she guessed the girl to be 14, 15 years old, again a mess, but traveling with a well-dressed older man. And that contrast between the two set off these alarm bells in her head. And when she tried to engage them in conversation, the man became defensive. So the flight attendant left a note in the bathroom, and the little girl wrote on the note and said, "I need help." And so when the plane landed, the police were waiting in the terminal. How many other people on that airplane saw that quote-unquote couple and dismissed it as, oh, it's probably her grandpa, or, oh, how she's probably a teenager that, refuses to take a shower? I mean, that's kind of what I would think.
Right. So you're right. They're out in plain sight, and when something looks suspicious, trust your gut, because something is wrong, something is off, and absolutely make that call. They'd be happy to take that call. That's what they do. They're 24-hour hotline, and they will look into it, and no harm if that wasn't what you thought. It was. It's not gonna, it's not gonna be a problem. So best that you call and really try to help. The U.S. is really trying to track and shut down these traffickers. They are arresting and prosecuting buyers. They are arresting and prosecuting traffickers more and more. They're trying to help get these victims away from these traffickers and get them to the services that they need. But it all helps if we all have our eyes and ears open, because we're the public and we're everywhere. Authorities can't be everywhere, so we need to help them.
Well, and to know what to look for, Lisa. I mean, that, just right there, that airline story that you told, I fly a lot, and I'm going to look the next time. When I walk to the bathroom, I mean, what is it to just look?
Right. Something off like that, if that was your daughter or granddaughter, she would be impeccably dressed as well, with expensive clothes or handbag or something. So that looked off. She knew it. The guy got defensive and angry. That's another red flag. So there she did a great job. So that's what we can all help. And that number again is 888-373-7888, and that's the National Human Trafficking Hotline number.
Okay, well, there you have it. Keep your eyes open. Call when you have a suspicion. We'll be back again next week.
Thanks for tuning in to Military Mom Talk Radio. Want more information? Check us out at militarymomtalkradio.com or find us on iTunes for more than 200 free episodes. Drop us an email or find us on Facebook. We are looking forward to another great discussion. We hope you'll join us on Military Mom